The most dangerous man in New York didn't know what to do with a little girl holding $5. The warehouse smelled like cold steel, cigarette smoke, and rain dragged in from the docks. Midnight meetings always smelled the same in my world. Expensive whiskey. Wet concrete. Fear hidden beneath tailored suits. I sat at the far end of the long wooden table, one hand resting near my glass, the other drumming once against the arm of my chair while the man across from me struggled to breathe normally. Nobody else in the room moved. 12 men in dark suits stood against the walls like statues carved from violence and silence. The only sound came from the rain hammering the metal roof overhead. "You lied to me," I said quietly. The man swallowed hard. His forehead glistened under the hanging light above him. "Damien. I can explain. Everyone always said that. Explain. Beg. Promise." But betrayal had a smell to it. Sour. Nervous. Desperate. And after 15 years running the Moretti family empire, I could recognize it faster than perfume. I leaned back in my chair slowly. Calmly. "That always scared people more. You sold information to the Russians," I said. "You put my men at risk." "No, I swear." The warehouse door suddenly creaked open behind us. Every head turned instantly. My guards reached inside their jackets on instinct. The freezing wind swept into the room first. Then came the little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6. Tiny. Pale skin. Blonde curls soaked from the rain. Oversized pink sneakers squeaking against the concrete floor while she clutched a crumpled dollar bill in both hands like it was treasure. For 3 full seconds, nobody spoke. She looked around the warehouse with wide blue eyes, completely unaware that half the room carried weapons beneath their jackets. One of my guards stepped forward carefully. "Sweetheart, you can't be in here." "I'm looking for Mr. Moretti," she said softly. Her voice echoed through the giant room with terrifying innocence. My men exchanged confused looks. Nobody knew what to do. Neither did I. The little girl spotted me at the end of the table and pointed immediately. "That's him." Her tiny shoes slapped softly against the floor as she walked directly toward me. No fear. No hesitation. Like she was approaching somebody's dad at a school meeting instead of the man newspapers called the Ghost King of Manhattan. My guard moved to stop her, but I raised one finger slightly. He froze in place. The little girl finally reached the table and stretched upward on her toes before placing a wrinkled $5 bill beside my whiskey glass. "I need to hire you," she whispered. A few of my men almost laughed. Almost. But something in her face stopped them. She was shaking. Not from fear. From cold. Rainwater dripped from the ends of her hair onto the concrete beneath her sneakers. I stared down at the bill for a long moment. $5. I'd spent more than that on the ice inside my drink. "Hire me for what?" I asked quietly. She looked down at her hands first, like she was trying not to cry. Then she lifted her eyes toward me again. "Can you help my mommy?" The warehouse went silent in a way I hadn't heard in years. Heavy. Strange. Human. I should have told someone to take her home. I should have walked away. Men like me didn't get involved in small tragedies. We created them. Controlled them. Buried them beneath expensive buildings and cleaner headlines. But then the little girl reached into the pocket of her yellow raincoat and pulled out a folded photograph. She slid it carefully across the table toward me. A tired-looking blonde woman stared back at me from the picture while holding the same little girl in her arms outside what looked like a laundromat. Her smile looked exhausted. Forced. Familiar. "Mom cries when she thinks I'm asleep," the little girl whispered. And for the first time in a very long time, I forgot how to breathe. Nobody in that warehouse understood why I stood up for a little girl holding $5 like it was the most important contract of my life. But I did not understand it either. I stared at the photograph in my hand while the rain continued pounding the roof overhead. The woman in the picture looked exhausted in the way only certain people do. The kind of tired that sleep cannot fix. Her blonde hair was tied back carelessly. Dark circles sat beneath soft gray eyes. But she was smiling for the little girl in her arms like she was trying to make the world feel less cruel for one more day. I had seen that smile before. My mother used to wear it. "What is your name?" I asked quietly. "Lily." Her tiny fingers twisted together nervously inside the sleeves of her raincoat. "And your mommy?" "Claire." I nodded once and looked toward Vincent, the man standing closest to me. "Get her something warm." Vincent blinked in surprise before immediately moving toward the back office. The men around the warehouse still looked confused. They had watched me negotiate with politicians, billionaires, and men dangerous enough to start wars with a phone call. None of those meetings had ever made me soften my voice. But somehow this child had. Lily looked around the warehouse carefully while I studied the photograph again. "How did you find this place?" I asked. "A man outside the grocery store told me scary people work near the docks." She shrugged slightly. "You looked scarier on television." A few quiet laughs escaped my guards before they quickly looked away. Lily did not notice. Or maybe she did not care. Vincent returned with a cup of hot chocolate from the kitchen upstairs. Lily accepted it carefully with both hands like someone had just handed her gold. "Thank you," she whispered. My chest tightened unexpectedly at the sound of her voice. Children were not supposed to sound that careful. Not at 6 years old. I walked slowly toward the giant warehouse windows overlooking the river while the city lights blurred through the rain outside. "Tell me why your mother needs help." Lily followed me halfway before stopping near the edge of the rug beneath my feet. "She cries after work." Her small voice almost disappeared beneath the storm. "And she thinks I do not hear when the landlord bangs on the walls." I closed my eyes briefly. "Does somebody hurt her?" Lily hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "Mom says he is just angry sometimes," she whispered. The room changed instantly. My men felt it too. The temperature did not actually drop, but silence spread across the warehouse like smoke. I turned slowly toward her. "Again." "Who?" Lily stared down into her cup. "Her boyfriend before. He still comes back." Every protective instinct I had buried beneath years of cold decisions suddenly woke up all at once. Violently. Not because of the boyfriend. Men like that existed everywhere. Weak men who mistook fear for love. No. What shook me was the image of this tiny little girl walking through Manhattan in the middle of the night because she believed nobody else would save her mother. "Does your mommy know you are here?" I asked carefully. Lily shook her head. "She is working late at the diner." Of course she was. Women like Claire Bennett did not get to fall apart. They worked through pain because rent still came every month. Because little girls needed winter coats and cereal and medicine. I looked toward Vincent again. "Find the address." He already had his phone out before I finished speaking. Efficient. Silent. Loyal. And clear my schedule for tonight. One of my men frowned carefully. "Boss, the meeting with the Albanians, move it." My voice cut through the warehouse sharply enough that nobody argued again. Lily looked up at me with wide eyes. "Are you going to help my mommy?" I stared at the rain sliding down the glass windows for a long moment before answering. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think I am." The drive into Brooklyn felt longer than usual that night. Rain blurred across the windshield of the black Escalade while the city outside looked exhausted and half asleep beneath flickering streetlights. Lily sat quietly beside me in the back seat, wrapped in one of my spare wool coats because her tiny rain jacket had been soaked through completely. She looked so small inside all that black fabric that something uncomfortable twisted in my chest every time I glanced at her. Children were supposed to smell like soap and crayons in school cafeterias. Lily smelled like rainwater and cold subway stations. "Are you always this quiet?" she asked softly after nearly 10 minutes of silence. Vincent almost choked trying not to laugh from the front passenger seat. I kept my eyes on the wet streets ahead. "Usually. Mom says quiet people are either very nice or very scary. Which one am I?" Lily studied me seriously for several seconds. "I do not know yet." That answer stayed in my head longer than it should have. We pulled into a neighborhood where the buildings leaned tiredly against each other like old men struggling to stay standing. Broken neon signs buzzed above closed laundromats. A liquor store on the corner glowed bright blue against the rain while two teenagers huddled beneath the awning sharing cigarettes. Brooklyn after midnight always looked honest. The wealthy parts of Manhattan hid suffering behind polished glass and security gates. Neighborhoods like this did not hide anything. Lily pointed toward a narrow apartment building squeezed between a pawn shop and a deli. "That is ours." The word ours almost hurt to hear. Home should never sound temporary coming from a child. I parked across the street while Vincent quietly checked the building entrance first. Instinct. Habit. The hallway lights inside flickered weakly through cracked windows. Old brick. Rusted fire escapes. Cheap rent. Dangerous enough after dark. "Stay here for 1 minute," I told Lily carefully. "Okay." She trusted me too easily. That bothered me more than fear would have. Vincent returned quickly, rain dripping from his coat collar. "Third floor. Apartment 3B. Woman matching Claire Bennett is inside alone." I stepped out into the rain without another word. Cold water soaked through my suit immediately while thunder rolled somewhere above the city skyline. The stairwell smelled like mildew, old cooking grease, and cigarettes buried deep into the walls over decades. Every floor creaked beneath my shoes. By the time I reached the third floor, I could already hear muffled coughing through the apartment door. Then footsteps. Fast. Nervous. The deadbolt unlocked suddenly. Claire Bennett appeared in the doorway wearing a faded diner uniform beneath a thin gray sweater. Blonde hair pulled into a messy knot. Tired gray eyes. An absolute panic the second she saw me standing there. "Lily?" Her voice cracked instantly. She looked past me into the hallway. "Oh my God, where is my daughter?" "She is safe," I said calmly. But mothers do not hear calm when fear takes over. Claire shoved past me barefoot into the hallway, terror written across her face. "Lily. Mommy." Tiny sneakers pounded up the stairs behind me before Lily launched herself directly into her mother's arms. Claire dropped to her knees so fast it almost looked painful. She held Lily against her chest like she thought somebody might steal her away again. Relief hit her hard enough that tears immediately filled her eyes. "Do not ever do that again," she whispered shakily into Lily's wet curls. "You scared me to death." Then Claire looked up at me. Really looked at me for the first time. Expensive black coat. Tailored suit. Men waiting downstairs in dark vehicles. Everything about me screamed danger in neighborhoods like this. She stood slowly while keeping one protective arm around Lily. "Who are you?" I stared at the exhausted woman in front of me for a long moment before answering quietly. "Your daughter hired me." Most people looked at me with fear first. Claire Bennett looked at me like I might ruin what little she had left. The apartment behind her was painfully small. A couch with worn fabric pushed against one wall. Children's drawings taped carefully beside a flickering lamp. A tiny kitchen barely separated from the living room by a cracked countertop. The radiator hissed loudly beneath the window while rainwater crawled slowly down the old glass outside. It was the kind of apartment people apologize for before you even stepped inside. Claire tightened her hold on Lily protectively. "What does that mean?" she asked carefully. Her voice was tired, but there was steel underneath it. Mothers like her learned how to sound brave even when they were terrified. Lily looked between us nervously. "Mommy, I went to ask him for help." Claire closed her eyes briefly like the sentence physically hurt her. "Lily, I used my birthday money." The little girl reached into her pocket and proudly pulled out the remaining crumpled dollar bills. "See?" Claire looked like she wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. Instead, she crouched down slowly in front of her daughter. "Sweetheart, you cannot disappear in the middle of the night like that. I thought something terrible happened to you. But you were crying again." Silence filled the apartment instantly. Heavy. Brutal. Honest. Claire froze completely while Lily stared back with heartbreaking innocence. Children always noticed more than adults wanted them to. Claire swallowed hard before brushing wet curls away from Lily's face. "Go put on dry pajamas for me, okay?" Lily hesitated. "But, please." Her daughter nodded quietly before disappearing down the narrow hallway toward what I assumed was the bedroom. The second she vanished, Claire stood again and wrapped both arms around herself tightly like she suddenly felt cold. "I am sorry," she whispered quickly. "She should not have bothered you." "She did not bother me." Claire finally looked directly into my eyes then. Most people lasted about 2 seconds before looking away. She lasted 5. Exhaustion made people fearless sometimes. "Who are you really?" she asked. Thunder rumbled outside while headlights from passing cars slid across the apartment walls in pale streaks. I could have lied. Men like me survived because we lied well. But something about that apartment made dishonesty feel ugly. "My name is Damien Moretti." The color drained from her face immediately. Of course she recognized the name. Everyone in New York recognized it. Newspaper articles. Rumors. Television debates whispered around words like organized crime and business empire and untouchable. Claire took one small step backward instinctively. Oh my God. There it was. Fear. Familiar. Predictable. I should have felt relieved by it. Instead, disappointment settled strangely in my chest. "You do not need to be afraid of me," I said quietly. Claire gave a short breathless laugh at that. "Easy for you to say." Her eyes flicked toward the hallway where Lily had disappeared. "Look, whatever this is, thank you for bringing her home. But we are fine." Fine. The apartment smelled faintly like instant noodles and laundry detergent because dinner had probably cost less than $10. The electricity buzzed weakly every few seconds from overloaded wiring. There were overdue notices stacked beside the microwave. Fine. I glanced toward the bruised shadow beneath her sleeve when she adjusted her sweater. Barely visible. But visible enough. "Does he still come here?" I asked calmly. Claire's expression changed instantly. Defensive. Closed off. "Who?" "The man making your daughter afraid." Her jaw tightened hard enough that I could see the tension from across the room. "That is none of your business." "Your daughter made it my business." Claire looked away first this time. Toward the rain outside. Toward the tired city glowing beyond cracked glass windows. "People like you do not help people like us," she whispered. I stared at her quietly for a long moment before answering. "Maybe people like me are the reason people like you need help in the first place." That finally made her look back at me again. Claire Bennett kept staring at me like she was trying to decide whether I was the answer to her problems or the beginning of worse ones. Honestly, I was not sure myself. The radiator hissed louder beside the window while rain tapped softly against the glass. Somewhere downstairs, a couple started arguing in the hallway. Old pipes groaned through the walls like the building itself was exhausted. Claire folded her arms tighter across her chest. "You should leave." The words sounded stronger than she felt. I could hear that immediately. "Probably," I admitted quietly. But neither of us moved. My eyes drifted toward the stack of unopened envelopes near the microwave again. Past due notices. Utility bills. Final warnings printed in red ink. The kind of papers that slowly suffocate people 1 month at a time. Claire noticed where I was looking and immediately stepped in front of them. Pride. Even now. Even drowning. "We are handling it," she said quickly. "How many jobs do you work?" She blinked at the sudden question. "What?" "Your daughter said you are never home." Claire looked away toward the kitchen sink overflowing with dishes she clearly had not had time to wash. 2. A lie. 3. Lily corrected softly from the hallway. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Lily stood there now wearing oversized purple pajamas and holding a stuffed rabbit missing one button eye. She looked heartbreakingly small beneath the dim apartment lighting. "Mom works at the diner and cleans offices and helps old people at church." Claire rubbed her forehead tiredly. "Lily, honey, and she does not sleep enough." I watched Claire carefully then. The slight sway in her posture. The pale skin beneath her eyes. The tiny burn mark near her wrist from kitchen work. She looked like someone carrying the entire world alone because nobody had ever offered to carry even a piece of it with her. "Why did you not call the police?" I asked quietly. Claire laughed again, but there was nothing amused about the sound. "About what?" "Your ex-boyfriend." "You mean the man who never leaves bruises where people can see them?" Silence settled heavily between us. Lily hugged her stuffed rabbit tighter. My jaw tightened automatically. Claire noticed. "See," she whispered. "That look right there. That is exactly why I do not want help from men like you." "Men like me?" "Powerful men." Her gray eyes finally locked onto mine again. "Men who think they can fix everything by making people disappear." I stared at her for a long moment. She was not wrong. That was the worst part. Before I could answer, loud banging suddenly echoed from downstairs near the building entrance. Claire froze instantly. So did Lily. Fear changed people fast. 1 second human. The next second survival instinct. Another bang rattled faintly through the apartment floor beneath our feet. Then a male voice yelling from below. Slurred. Angry. "Claire." Every muscle in her body locked up. Lily moved closer to her mother automatically. "Turn the lights off," Claire whispered quickly. "Do not let him know we are home." I did not move. "Damien, please." There it was again. Fear. But not for herself. For Lily. Always for Lily. The shouting downstairs grew louder. Something metal clanged violently near the stairwell. Vincent's voice crackled softly through my earpiece from outside. "Boss." Male approaching the building entrance. Intoxicated. Aggressive. Claire heard enough to understand immediately. Her face went pale. "You brought people here." "I never go anywhere alone." "You need to leave before he sees." Heavy footsteps started climbing the stairs outside. Fast. Uneven. Claire's breathing turned shallow instantly while Lily buried her face against her mother's side. I stood perfectly still near the center of the apartment as the footsteps reached the third-floor landing. Then came the pounding on the door. Hard enough to shake the frame. "Claire," the man shouted from outside. "I know you are in there." The entire apartment went silent except for Lily's frightened breathing. Then Claire whispered something so quietly I almost did not hear it at all. "Please do not let him scare my daughter tonight." And somehow that scared me more than the shouting outside ever could. The man outside kept pounding on the door like he owned every terrified breath inside that apartment. "Claire," he shouted again. "Open the damn door." Lily flinched so hard her stuffed rabbit slipped from her hands onto the floor. Claire immediately pulled her daughter closer while trying to hide the panic rising in her own face. I had seen fear in 1,000 forms over the years. Men afraid of prison. Politicians afraid of scandal. Rivals afraid of losing power. But this was different. This was the quiet terror of someone who had spent too long waiting for footsteps outside the door. Another violent bang rattled the cheap wooden frame. "I know you are in there." Claire looked at me desperately. "Please," she whispered. "If he sees you here, it will only make things worse." That sentence settled heavily in my chest. Worse. She honestly believed things could still become worse than this. I walked slowly toward the door while loosening the cuffs of my black coat. Calmly. Quietly. Behind me, Claire's breathing turned uneven. "Damien." I stopped when she said my name. Her voice sounded small now. Tired. Human. "Do not hurt him." The request surprised me enough that I turned back toward her. Claire stood there beneath the flickering kitchen light wearing a diner uniform stained with coffee and exhaustion while protecting her little girl with both arms. And somehow she was still asking for mercy for the man terrifying her family. "You still care about him?" I asked quietly. Claire looked toward the floor for a second before answering. "I just do not want Lily to see something terrible." That answer did something ugly to me. Because suddenly I understood exactly what kind of woman Claire Bennett was. The kind who absorbed suffering quietly if it meant protecting her child from even one more scar. Another bang shook the apartment harder than before. "Claire." I opened the door before he could hit it again. The man standing outside nearly stumbled forward from surprise. Mid-30s. Heavy jacket soaked from rain. Bloodshot eyes. The sharp smell of alcohol filled the hallway immediately. He froze when he saw me. Most men did. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. I stared at him calmly without answering. Behind me, the apartment remained silent except for the radiator hissing softly near the window. The man tried to look past my shoulder into the apartment. "Claire," he snapped loudly. "Why is there another guy in there?" Fear flashed across his face then. Not fear for Claire. Fear of losing control. I knew men like him too well. Weak men always mistook intimidation for strength because it was the only power they could afford. "You need to leave," I said quietly. He laughed once. Nervous. Forced. "This is between me and my girl." My jaw tightened instantly at the phrase. My girl. Like Claire belonged to him. Like exhaustion and fear and overdue bills were ownership papers. "She is not your girl," I said softly. Something in my voice must have reached him finally because his expression shifted slightly. Confusion first. Then recognition. He looked at the tailored suit. The watch beneath my sleeve. The dangerous stillness. Men usually sensed what I was before they understood it. "Wait," his face paled. "You are Moretti." I said nothing. The hallway suddenly felt very small around him. Rain hammered faintly against the stairwell windows downstairs while one of my black SUVs idled quietly at the curb outside. The man swallowed hard. "I did not know she knew people like you." "She does not." I stepped slightly closer. Not threatening. Not loud. Somehow that always scared people more. But her daughter knows how to ask for help. Silence stretched between us painfully. Then Lily's tiny voice drifted softly from inside the apartment. "Mommy?" The man's entire face changed hearing her voice. Shame flickered there for half a second before disappearing beneath anger again. I just came to talk. Not tonight. He looked past me one final time toward Claire standing in the apartment shadows. Then his shoulders lowered slowly like something inside him had finally collapsed. Without another word, he turned and walked away down the hallway into the sound of rain and old building pipes groaning through the walls. I watched until he disappeared completely. Then I closed the apartment door gently behind me. And for the first time all night, the apartment felt quiet. The silence after fear always felt strange. Too fragile. Too temporary. Claire locked the apartment door with shaking hands while Lily climbed quietly onto the couch clutching her stuffed rabbit against her chest. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The rain outside softened into a steady whisper against the windows while the old radiator continued hissing like it was trying to keep the tiny apartment alive through sheer stubbornness. Claire finally turned toward me slowly. "You should not have done that." I loosened my coat slightly. "He left." "That is not what I mean." Her gray eyes looked exhausted again now that the panic had passed. Men like him do not walk away peacefully after feeling embarrassed. I studied her carefully. "You are worried about me?" Claire blinked once like she had not expected the question. "I am worried about what happens tomorrow." That answer stayed with me. Because she still thought in survival terms. Tomorrow. Rent. Work. Fear. Repeat. Lily curled up deeper into the couch cushions while fighting sleep. The little girl had dark circles beneath her eyes that no 6-year-old should ever have. "Mommy," she whispered softly. "Did I do something bad?" Claire crossed the room immediately and sat beside her daughter. "No, baby. But you are upset." Claire brushed trembling fingers through Lily's damp curls. "I was scared because I love you." Lily looked down guiltily. "I just wanted to help." Something inside my chest tightened painfully at those words. Children were supposed to ask for toys. Cartoon backpacks. Ice. Cream after school. Not help. Never help. Claire kissed the top of Lily's head gently before glancing toward me again. "She has school tomorrow," she said quietly. Translation. It was time for me to leave. I nodded once and reached for my coat fully this time. But before I could move toward the door, Lily suddenly sat upright on the couch. "Wait." Her tiny voice stopped all movement inside the apartment instantly. She climbed off the couch and disappeared into the bedroom for several seconds before returning with a folded piece of paper covered in crayons. She held it out carefully toward me with both hands. "For you." I took the paper slowly. It was a drawing. 3 stick figures standing beneath yellow sunshine. One tall figure in a black suit beside 2 smaller ones. Above our heads, she had written in uneven childish letters, "Thank you, Mr. Damien." I stared at the drawing longer than I should have. My mother used to keep my drawings taped to the refrigerator in our old apartment in Queens before everything in my life turned cold and expensive and dangerous. I had not thought about that in years. "You drew this tonight?" I asked quietly. Lily nodded proudly. "Your hair was hard." A soft sound escaped Claire beside the couch. Not quite a laugh. But close. The first almost laugh I had heard from her all night. And somehow that tiny sound hit me harder than threats ever could. I folded the drawing carefully instead of stuffing it into my pocket carelessly like I normally would. Lily noticed that too. Children always noticed everything. "Thank you," I said quietly. She smiled sleepily before curling back against her mother's side. Claire watched me with confusion now instead of fear. That might have been even more dangerous. "Why are you really helping us?" she asked softly. Honest question. Honest enough that I almost answered honestly too. Because your daughter walked into a warehouse full of monsters and still believed somebody inside might have a heart left. Because you look exhausted in the exact same way my mother used to. Because somewhere along the way I forgot what decent people sounded like until your little girl handed me $5 with shaking hands. Instead, I looked toward the rain sliding down the apartment windows and answered quietly, maybe I am tired of watching good people suffer while bad people sleep peacefully. Claire stared at me silently after that. Not afraid. Not trusting either. Just seeing me differently now. And that terrified me more than anything else had tonight. My phone vibrated once inside my coat pocket. Vincent. I ignored it. Then Lily's sleepy voice drifted softly through the apartment one last time before her eyes closed completely. Mommy? Yes, baby. I think he looks lonely too. And for some reason, nobody in the room knew what to say after that. I left Claire's apartment at almost 2 in the morning, but something about that little family followed me into the rain anyway. The city looked different driving back through Manhattan. Quieter. Colder. Every red traffic light reflected across wet streets like blood diluted by water while jazz hummed softly through the speakers inside the Escalade. Vincent kept glancing at me from the passenger seat like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Finally, he spoke carefully. Boss? What? You missed 3 meetings tonight. I stared out the window toward rows of glowing skyscrapers sliding past us in the darkness. I know. Vincent hesitated. Over a waitress and a kid? I should have corrected him immediately. Should have reminded him that people like Claire Bennett were dangerous distractions in my world. Weak points got exploited. Attachments got buried. That was how survival worked when your last name carried the kind of weight mine did. But instead, I pulled Lily's crayon drawing from my coat pocket again and looked down at it beneath the dim interior light. Thank you, Mr. Damien. The letters were uneven. Crooked. Perfect. Have someone pay the overdue balance on Claire Bennett's apartment, I said quietly. Vincent blinked once. Anonymous? Completely. And the boyfriend? My jaw tightened automatically at the thought of him pounding on that apartment door while Lily shook with fear behind her mother's legs. I do not want him near them again. Vincent nodded once like he already understood exactly what that meant. We drove the rest of the way in silence. My penthouse overlooked nearly the entire Manhattan skyline from 50 floors above the city. Glass walls. Marble floors. Expensive art nobody actually cared about. It was the kind of place magazines called impressive. Personally, I thought it sounded empty. The moment I walked inside, the quiet hit me again. No tiny sneakers squeaking across old apartment floors. No sleepy little voice asking strange honest questions. Just silence echoing through rooms too large for one person. I loosened my tie slowly and walked toward the kitchen, but my phone vibrated before I reached the counter. Vincent. What? Boss, you might want to hear this directly. Something in his tone made me stop moving entirely. Talk. The diner Claire works at just called an ambulance. Every muscle in my body locked instantly. Why? Lily collapsed. The world went terrifyingly still around me. What happened? Looks like an asthma attack. Claire was working double shifts. The neighbor watching Lily did not realize how bad it got. I was already moving before he finished speaking. Elevator. Garage. Engine roaring awake beneath my hands. Rain still hammered the city streets while midnight traffic blurred around me in streaks of red and white light. I could not remember the last time panic hit me this fast. Men had tried to kill me before. Rivals had threatened everything I owned. None of it had ever made my heartbeat feel like this. Mount Sinai Hospital glowed bright against the storm when I arrived. Vincent met me near the emergency entrance while nurses pushed stretchers through sliding glass doors under harsh fluorescent lights. Where are they? I demanded. Pediatric floor. I moved through the hospital so quickly that security stepped aside without even thinking about it. Fear had a smell in places like hospitals. Antiseptic. Burnt coffee. Exhaustion. Hope barely hanging on by threads. I found Claire sitting outside one of the pediatric rooms with her face buried in trembling hands. Her diner uniform was still stained with coffee from work. Blonde hair falling loose around her shoulders. Completely shattered. She looked up the second my shoes stopped in front of her chair. Damien. Just hearing my name and her voice almost broke something inside me. Is she okay? Claire nodded quickly, tears sliding down her face anyway. The doctors stopped the attack. She is sleeping now. Relief hit me so hard I had to look away briefly toward the hospital windows. Claire wiped at her eyes shakily. I could not leave work fast enough. The guilt in her voice sounded unbearable. Claire, I am her mother, she whispered brokenly. I am supposed to protect her. I looked through the small glass window into Lily's hospital room then. Tiny body sleeping beneath white blankets. Breathing machine humming softly beside her bed. And suddenly all I could think was one terrible thing. A 6-year-old child should never have needed to hire a stranger to save her family. Hospitals at 3 in the morning had a different kind of silence. Softer than fear. Sadder than exhaustion. The pediatric floor glowed beneath pale fluorescent lights while nurses walked quietly through the hallways carrying charts and paper cups of cold coffee. Somewhere down the corridor, a baby cried briefly before falling silent again. Claire sat beside Lily's hospital bed with one hand wrapped protectively around her daughter's tiny fingers like letting go might somehow make her disappear. I stood near the window watching rain slide slowly down the glass 30 floors above Manhattan. Neither of us had spoken much during the last hour. Some nights broke people too deeply for conversation. Lily shifted slightly beneath the blankets, drawing both our attention instantly. Her eyelashes fluttered before sleepy blue eyes slowly opened. Mommy? Claire immediately leaned closer. Hey, baby. Relief filled her voice so completely it almost hurt to hear. You scared me. Lily looked around the room weakly before spotting me near the window. A tiny smile appeared immediately. Mr. Damien came. Something strange settled heavily in my chest at how happy she sounded about that. Claire brushed tears from her face quickly before Lily could notice them. You need to rest, sweetheart. Lily nodded sleepily before reaching beneath her blanket with small careful movements. Wait. She pulled something from her pajama pocket and held it out toward me. A single silver coin. $1. I stared at it in confusion while stepping closer to the bed. What is this? The rest of your money, she whispered proudly. Now we are even. Claire covered her mouth instantly as emotion crashed across her face. But I could not speak at all for several seconds. Because nobody had ever tried to pay me back before. Not really. People feared me. Used me. Owed me. But this little girl lying in a hospital bed with tangled blonde curls and tired eyes honestly believed debts should be repaid fairly. I took the coin carefully from her tiny hand like it was something priceless. Thank you, I said quietly. Lily smiled sleepily again before her eyes drifted shut once more beneath the soft hospital lights. The breathing machine continued its gentle rhythm beside her bed while rain tapped softly against the windows overlooking the city. Claire stood slowly beside me after Lily fell asleep again. You do not have to stay, she whispered. I looked down at the silver coin resting in my palm. I know. But I stayed anyway. Another hour passed quietly before Claire finally sat beside the hospital window with exhaustion written across every inch of her face. I used to think hard work fixed everything, she admitted softly. You just worked harder. Slept less. Sacrificed more. She laughed weakly at herself. Turns out life does not really care how tired you are. I leaned against the wall across from her. My mother used to say almost the same thing. Claire looked surprised. Your mother? She worked 3 jobs after my father died. The words felt strange leaving my mouth. I almost never talked about her anymore. She spent her whole life trying to protect me from this world. Claire glanced toward Lily sleeping beneath the blankets. Did it work? I looked out across Manhattan glowing beneath the storm outside. No, silence stretched softly between us after that. Comfortable this time. Honest. Finally Claire looked toward me carefully. Why did you really help us? The question sounded different now. Not suspicious anymore. Just real. I stared at Lily sleeping peacefully for the first time since I met her. Then I looked down at the crayon drawing folded carefully inside my coat pocket beside the silver dollar coin. Because your daughter walked into a room full of dangerous men, I said quietly, and somehow she still believed one of them might choose kindness. Claire's eyes filled again instantly. Outside the hospital window, the city continued moving beneath rain and neon lights and endless noise. But inside that tiny hospital room, everything felt still for the first time in years. And somewhere between a $5 bill, a crayon drawing, and one little girl brave enough to ask for help, I realized something terrifying. Power could make an entire city fear me. But Lily Bennett had done something nobody else ever could. She made me remember I still had a soul.